That was a dream, to be intelligent. I just never thought it was going to be. I said, I want to learn how to speak properly and be intelligent and teach. And I wanted to go to every country around the world and teach. And as you know, I live on a ship that goes around the world. And that's part of the reason, so I can travel the world and teach. That what we think about, what we visualize, what we affirm, what we feel, what we write down, what we clarify, what we act upon, changes the trajectory of our life.
This is your real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. If you've been listening for very long, you know that I love personal development. I love pushing myself in those ways and reading and educating myself. And this guest today has pushed me in different ways. And he was a guest on May the 6th in 2020. It was show 563. I was excited to have him back on the show. His name is Dr. Jihn Demartini. He's a world-renowned specialist in human behavior, researcher, author, global educator, to say the least. He's taught in, I think he said, 160 some countries, and he literally lives on a ship and travels the world. He's read over 30,000 books, and you're going to hear that come out today. He's got an amazing background and story that if you think that there's roadblocks, there's reasons you cannot learn, you cannot have a bigger vision, he's going to just blow that away today. And from his story at 17, from being homeless to where he's at today, and what helped him to pivot his vision, and how he figured out what his priorities should be, and then also how he 10x'd his business in 18 months with less stress than he had before. And so you're going to hear that today with Jihn. Jihn, welcome back to the show. I'm honored to have you. Again, you're one of over 2,000 guests now that really stood out to me 4 years ago even. I still remember many parts of our conversation then. I encourage the listeners to go back and listen. It was show 563, and now we're at 2022. So you are just a wealth of knowledge. I love your story, your background, and I think you're going to resonate with so many of the listeners. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me again. I was looking forward to it.
Well, Jihn, I'd love for you to highlight. I know last time I think we briefly talked about it, but I would almost like to spend just a couple of minutes talking about this when you were 17, and getting to 17. It sounds like there were some setbacks and maybe limiting beliefs, all those things, and dropped out of high school. I'm going to let you, I don't want to tell too much of your story, but I want you to be able to elaborate there, because I was just sharing with you a little bit. I love mentoring young men, and man, I struggle with when they're not motivated, when they're not wanting to go to learn or to read and to take advantage of all this that's at their fingertips. I feel like. Because I didn't then either, but there was also a shift for me at some point. But I would love to hear, that part of this transition, and then obviously how this man influenced you and what changed.
I'd probably best to go back to a little bit earlier, just to
Please.
Transition there.
Yeah.
I was born in 1954, so I'll be 70 here in a few months. And I was born with an arm and leg turned in and a speech impediment. So at a year and a half old, I was wearing braces on my left arm and leg, and I had to put strings and buttons in my mouth to learn how to speak properly. I couldn't make sounds properly. By the time I was 4, I got out of my braces. All I wanted to do is run, because you've been constrained for a few years. You want to run. And when I got to be 5, I was running everywhere. I tried to go to elementary school, and I found out when I got to about 6 that we were trying to learn how to read, and no matter what I was doing, it didn't work. I just couldn't make sense out of words, and I couldn't still pronounce words properly. And I wasn't making any meaning or any sense out of it. So I went from normal reading to remedial reading to the dunce class. We had to wear a dunce cap, a little cap on our head. Me and Dalrymple. I made it through school, though, by asking the smartest kids questions, because if they said things, I picked up stuff. But reading and writing wasn't working. Somehow there was dyslexia and other things. My teacher, when I was 6 going on 7, had my parents come to the school and said, I'm afraid your son's never going to be able to read, not going to be able to write, not communicate effectively, probably won't go very far in life or amount to much in life, but he likes to run. Maybe you can put him in some sort of sport. And baseball was my thing, and I was pretty good at that. By the time I turned 12 in Houston, Texas, and I know you know that location, I got moved to Richmond, Texas. My parents moved to the country, and we lived in a lower socioeconomic area and went to a small little junior high kind of place. And I didn't have a bunch of smart kids to ask questions to, and I ended up failing and dropping out. So I started on the streets when I was 13 and picked up surfing. And Texas wasn't the surf capital. And so I had a dream to go and make my way to California, Mexico, and Hawaii. So when I was 14, I hitchhiked. After living on the streets, I hitchhiked to California and down into Mexico. At 15, I panhandled enough money to make it over to Hawaii. I lived under a bridge at Kamehameha Highway, then in a park bench at Iikai Beach Park, then in a bathroom when it rained, and an abandoned car. And finally, I socially climbed up to a tent. And I was riding big waves. I worked my way up to riding some big waves. I got in 3 surf movies and a surf book and some magazines. I was doing pretty good. I was riding big waves with the top, not the very top tier, like the top 12, but in the second tier. And then I nearly died at 17 after being in Hawaii for a little over 2 years. In the recovery of that, I was led to a health food store and then a yoga class. And at a yoga class one night, a woman yogi introduced a guest speaker. His name was Paul C. Bragg. And in 1 hour, this one man with one message that one night really spoke to me. I guess everybody probably thought they were speaking to him or them, but I really felt he was speaking to me. And that night, it made me believe, after listening to him speak, that maybe I could overcome my learning problems and my speaking problems and someday become intelligent. I didn't think that would ever be my path. I assumed I was going to make surfboards and surf and live kind of a, simple life. But that night made me believe that maybe I could overcome my learning challenges and someday become intelligent. That was a dream, to be intelligent. I just never thought it was going to be. And that night I had a vision. I got it. And there's a gentleman out of Melbourne, Australia that heard me speak about this story and painted that vision. I'd like to share it with you. I pulled it up just when you asked me about this.
Yeah, please.
But the night I was there with him, I saw a vision of me standing on a balcony, walking through a stoned archway, standing on a balcony, looking out over a square with 1 million people in it, with iconic buildings from around the world. And I just imagined myself speaking, and this guy painted it.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
And I don't know if they can see that, but hopefully they can.
Yeah, if you're on YouTube, you can definitely see this vision.
That was a dream, to become a teacher. The night I met him, I said, I want to learn how to, speak properly and be intelligent and teach. Because I always, when you think of intelligence when you're a teenager, you think a teacher, professor or something. And I wanted to go to every country around the world and teach. And as you know, I live on a ship that goes around the world. And that's part of the reason, so I can travel the world and teach. And, but that night, my life changed. He said that what we think about, what we visualize, what we affirm, what we feel, what we write down, what we clarify, what we act upon, changes the trajectory of our life. And really nobody ever talked to me like he did. This guy just was speaking to me, and he just made me believe that I could overcome my challenges. And I actually went to a health food store, inspired by him to go to this store, and I found a book. It was Chico's Organic Gardening and Natural Living, and there's a hippie on the front cover of it. And I had long hair and a beard at the time, and I thought, if that guy could write the book, I bet I could read it. He looks like me. And that was the first book I ever tried to pick up to try to read. I didn't successfully read it, but it was mainly pictures of gardens And for some reason, I was drawn to that book because of the picture. But I made a commitment to, and in a meditation, had a dream to overcome my learning problems. And I eventually flew back to LA, hitchhiked back to Texas, and took a GED, which is high school equivalency. And I couldn't even read half the questions, but some blessing, somehow I passed, guessing. And I tried to go to college. I tried to go to junior college. You can't get into college with that test, but you can get into junior college. So I tried to go to Wharton Junior College, and I thought the same miracle was going to happen, that I was just going to pass the test by guessing. And the first test I ever took in the school, I got a 27. Everybody else was 72 and above. I was down at the 27. And all I know, when I got that grade, I thought, there's no way I'm going to pull this off. And I thought to myself, I'll never read, write, communicate, never amount thing, never go very far. I kept running what that first grade teacher said. And I drove home crying and curled up on a fetal position underneath this Bible stand in my parents' house. And my mom came home from shopping and she saw me crying. She hadn't seen me crying in a long time. And she said, "What happened, son?" I said, "I blew the test. I needed a 72 to pass. I got a 27. It says, I guess I'll never read, write, communicate, never amount thing, never go very far. I was apologizing to her. And she said something to me that was very meaningful. She paused, she looked at me, she put her hand on my shoulder, and she said, "Son, whether you go back to Hawaii, or whether you go out and become a teacher and travel the world like you dream, whether you return to Hawaii and ride big waves like you've done, or return to the streets and panhandle, which you've also done, I just want to let you know that your father and I are going to love you no matter what. We just love you." When she said that, I really needed that moment. My hand went into a fist. I saw that vision back in my mind. And I said to myself, I'm going to master this thing called reading, studying, and learning. I'm going to master this thing called teaching, healing, and philosophy. And I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm going to travel whatever distance. I'm going to pay whatever price to give my service of love across this planet. I'm not going to let any human being on the face of the earth stop me, not even myself. And I got up and hugged my mom with a determination there was no turning back. And I went into my room and I got a Funk and Wagnall's dictionary out. And I made a commitment to memorize 30 words a day. And so I would write the words 20 times, put them in a sentence, pronounce them, and regurgitate those words. And my mom would test me on 30 words a day until my vocabulary was 20,000 words. And I was passing school. And from that day on, I don't believe there's been any day in the last 52 years that I haven't been reading. And my teaching career started at 18 because somebody asked me to teach them what little I knew from the yoga that I had learned. My first student was a 375-pound Afro-American woman who wanted me to teach her yoga. My second student was a guy from Iran, from Tehran, Persian, that asked me to teach him meditation. And then I gathered a group of students that wanted me to teach them mathematics because I was learning algebra. And it just took off from there. By the time I was at the University of Houston 2 years later, I used to have 100, 125, 150, 400 people every single day under the trees gathered together, and I was teaching classes, which is where they have the entrepreneur, the Bauer School of Entrepreneurship sits on that spot today. And I was one of the founding people from that university school. So it just happens to be where I used to teach. So it just goes to show that it doesn't matter where you are, what you've gone through, what you've been through. What matters is, do you have a dream, and are you willing to do whatever it takes to get the dream? And that's why if there's a teenager out there, I was 17 when I met him, a week before my 18th birthday. If you're a teenager, 17, 18 years old, just no matter what is going on in your life, it's on the way, not in the way. And you can take it and do something extraordinary with your life with it. So just, it's time to get clear about what that is and take advantage of the momentum building achievements that you can do when you get clear and authentic and be inspired by something that's meaningful.
Love the detail, John, and the inspiration, and I love how you highlighted your mother coming in there too and just saying, "Hey, we love you no matter what." Right? I can relate to that as well. My mother has supported me in many endeavors and just man, been my biggest cheerleader, and whether she probably thought it was a good idea or a bad idea, whatever I was doing, and so I just look up to her in a big way, and I'm so grateful, right, for that inspiration and just the belief in me that I could go do something. So, you, man, all the setbacks, getting all the way to Hawaii and all that, you heard this guy speak, though. It sounded like you already had the desire, though, to learn and to be able to teach, but you just felt like it wasn't you. You weren't going to be able to do it, but you had the desire, it seemed like.
Well, I wasn't conscious of it until that night. And he inspired me because he was a teacher. And I thought someday when I'm his age, I want to be able to pass the torch to a 17-year-old like he just did. But because he had such an influence on myself and everybody in that room that night, because it wasn't just me that had an impact, it was impacted. It was everybody in that room. And we just knew there's something happened that night. And I wanted to do that. So I can't say that I had any conscious. I never read a book until I was 18. I never really got through a book. So I can't say I had a conscious awareness, but I didn't like being dumb. I had to ask a guy named Jackie Royd, who's a friend of mine still to this day, over in the tent that I lived in. He used to go and hang out at the tent, and I asked him to read for me. And he thought that was peculiar. He didn't know it was because I couldn't read. I just said, I love the way you read. I used to say it in ways where, they felt like empowered to do it. But I said, tell me, I love the way your words are. I love the way you speak. Read to me. And if somebody read to me, I would pick up stuff. But just for some reason, the words and the meaning and the words didn't make sense. So it's not that I didn't have a desire to want to learn. I learned surfing. I learned baseball. But academia was just not there until that night. And then I thought, with what he just said, if I visualize it and focus on it and do the things that he's talking about, I believe that maybe I could overcome this challenge and find a way of learning. And I did. And it was a slow, steady process. 30 words a day grows a vocabulary. And then I just never put a book down. I have not stopped reading every single day since.
I love the testimony to, even 30,000 books and reading every day. I agree. It's so crucially important, the daily consistent actions, right, of that growth. And I want to just talk about that. I want you to be able to elaborate on this a moment. Something I've been thinking about recently. I try to take in lots of books, whether it's audio or reading physical books or depending on what I'm doing all the time. But I love your thoughts here. I've tried to slow that down a little bit so I can more so study a little more than just like take it in. It's like I've questioned myself. Okay, I've just read or listened to however many books. How much did I actually implement? Right. From those books, what happened because of me reading those books? Did anything? So I don't know. I wondered how this progression, from, just getting started reading, actually not being able to read, to now up to 30,000 books, reading every day. How do you study books now to get the most out of them, so you are growing personally as much as possible?
Well, I learned very quickly, a very short period of time, that first of all, I stated to myself that I have a photographic, autographic mind, whatever I read or retain. So I started that statement. That's been with me all these years. Then I realized that if I have a purpose for the reading and I link it to what I value most, my retention, absorption, retention, assimilation go up. And if I have a purpose for that to use as soon as possible, it accelerates my retention. So when I was in professional school, I used to read usually 4 to 7 books in the morning. It took about 45 minutes to knock out a book. I was speed reading by then. And then that night I would talk and do a presentation on whatever I read that morning. So I learned that the quicker I give out information about what went in, the higher the retention rate. So if I extract out space and time from my mind, from input to output, retention goes up towards infinity. So I realized that it's applying it and putting it into some practical use. And so I had another statement. I said that I create original ideas that serve humanity. I create original ideas that serve humanity. I read, whatever I read or retain, I create original ideas that serve humanity. So I constantly would take the information in, and how do I apply it in a practical way that can serve people and share that with people? And that's where I accelerated the retention and became polymathic in the sense of all the varieties of things I get to speak about. All of it's related to the involvement of human consciousness and the mastery of life. But it's basically, whether that be business or finance or social, whatever it is, but there's a core thread to it. And I linked everything I studied to that core thread and to what I value most. So I'm inspired to want to absorb the information. I realized when I was about 18, 19, that some books would put me to sleep and some would wake me up. And my reticular activating system was responding. And the reason it was waking me up is because I was seeing how it was going to help me fulfill my mission, and the other wasn't. So I then started, by age 23, I learned about values and axiology, and I started asking, how specifically is this content and this book and this topic and subtopics going to help me fulfill my mission? And if I made links, I neuroplastically remodeled the brain so the information would be assimilated and absorbed and applied. And so that way, once I learned that, I could take any information, I could absorb it and apply it and put it in practical application and create original ideas with it.
You know, my wife homeschools our children, and they're reading all the time. It's amazing to love, even at like 9 and 10, my boys, how much they love to read. But they narrate almost everything that they read back to my wife, you know, in numerous scenarios. And it sounds like that's almost what you're doing, right? You have a presentation. Like if they know they're going to have to narrate it, they are reading differently, right? Than if they don't have a purpose, like you talked about.
One of the things, you know, there's a lovely lady that was in Houston, Texas. I'm assuming she's still cranking, but her name is Marilyn Wilhelm. She has a Marilyn Wilhelm school. And she used to find out what the highest values of her children are. And she said that's the source of their gift and excellence. And she would let them teach that class. So she'd say, well, Johnny, you're interested in someday building a business. So you're going to be teaching the business section in this class, this semester, this term or whatever. And so you're a ballerina. You want to be the ballet. You're going to be teaching us about the fine arts and the ballerina topic. And everybody was excelling in what they loved doing, and they got to be the teacher. And so they got to want to study, to present, to be acknowledged for their leadership role in each area. And she was generating leaders all over the place. And they were graduating by 13. They were graduating, ready to go to Rice University. It was amazing watching it. But they got to find their specialty and their core competence. Whatever is highest on our value, our ontological identity revolves around it, our teleological purpose revolves around it, and our epistemological area of expertise and excellence revolve around it. If we find that and target that, we excel. We build unstoppable momentum, incremental momentum that way.
I think it's hard for most of us to figure out what that is, right?
Well, but your life demonstrates it. See, the only confusion I found, I've been teaching and helping people in identifying what their highest value is since 1978, 46 years now. And what's interesting is whatever's highest on your value, you spontaneously are inspired to act on. So the only thing that stops us from being clear and knowing what that is the subordination to outer authorities that we minimize ourselves to and put on pedestals, and then inject some of their values and cloud the clarity of our own, and then second guess and question ourselves and devalue what it is that we're inspired by, because, well, who are we? And the comparison, I always tell people, we're not here to compare ourselves to other people. We're here to compare our daily actions to what we value most. If we compare ourselves and put people on pedestals, we'll be second at being somebody else instead of first at being us, and we'll be living in their shadows instead of on their shoulders. So the key is not to compare. The key is to with others, it's to compare your actions to what you value most. And you can determine the values. We went over that on the last show. You can go through and follow 13 steps and narrow down what your values are dictating and what your life is showing, because your life reveals and demonstrates what you value. We just don't want to admit it. We don't want to face it because it doesn't always match what we think it should be and ought to be. Nietzsche said there's is and there's ought. Ought is what society expects, and is what you're inspired by. And finding that and having the courage to stand out uniquely, being that, and be an unborrowed visionary instead of a borrowed visionary, and be able to let the voice and the vision on the inside be louder than all opinions on the outside. That's the rare individual that stands the test of time and leaves a mark and changes the course of history.
I know, and just so the listener knows, we covered a number of steps in the last show about, just figuring out what's most important to you. And John, maybe give us just a couple of the highest and ones there, the most important ones that you would highlight there, so the listeners today can actually implement and start to figure that out?
A fast version of it. Proxemics is the study of your personal space, the topology of your space. And if you look carefully, something that's really, 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 really important to you, you keep close to you. You keep within your intimate 18 inches or your individual space, which is within 4 feet, within reach of you. So look at what you fill your space with, that you engage with your senses and motor activities on a daily basis, and it tells you what's valuable. Look at how you spend your time. You find time, make time, spend time on things that are valuable to you, run out of time for things that aren't. Look at what energizes you, because when you're doing something that's high in your values, your energy goes up. Look at where you spend your money, because you'll find money, make money, and spend money on things that are valuable to you, and you'll run out of money and don't want to spend money on things that aren't. Look at where you're most ordered and organized. Look at where you're most disciplined and reliable and focused. Look at where what you think about how you want your life to be that shows evidence of coming true, and what you visualize about how you want your life to be that shows evidence coming true, and what you internally dialogue with yourself about how you want your life to be that shows evidence of coming true. And then what do you converse with other people about most? When you keep wanting to converse and talk, what does it keep going to? What's the conversation? And then what is it that inspires you and brings tears to your eyes, where you have a moment of authenticity? Document that, because that's a sign of authenticity and that's a sign of high value. And look at what the most persistent, consistent goals that you've had that are actually manifesting and coming true. And then look at what you spontaneously want to study, read, learn about, and watch on YouTube. The content and the pattern of those 13 questions will reveal what your life is demonstrating objectively, what is really important to you. And it may not match the fantasies that you think it should be according to social tradition and convention and mores of the social world around you.
Yeah, and that goes back to the other people's values and priorities that are influencing you, or you're allowing to influence you, like you were talking about a minute ago.
If you don't fill your day with high priority actions that inspire you, your day is going to fill up with low priority distractions that don't. If you don't fill your life with that which you design, you're going to fill it up with duty. And if you don't pursue challenges that inspire you, you're going to keep attracting challenges that don't. So it's about prioritization. It's about giving yourself permission to live congruently with what you really prioritize, what's really important in your life. How are you going to be a very important person if you're not focused on very important things?
And then, talk about how this is in connection to the, your vision, right? And I know you talk often about the astronomical vision. And what is that? Help us to awaken that a little bit, like you said.
Well, every time you walk congruently according to your highest value and move in the direction of that, your space and time horizons expand in your mind. That means because what you do is you tend to increase the probability of achieving it. You're not limping your life, you're walking your talk. When you achieve things, you tend to want to expand and do something greater. So space and time keeps getting bigger on what you want to do in life. And so people who do that, their space and time horizons get bigger and bigger, and they go from themselves to their family, to their community, to their city, to the state, to the nation, to the world, and beyond. And it's the astronomical vision that leaves the global effect. If you want to make a difference in yourself, you need a vision as big as your family. If you want to make a difference in your family, you need a vision as big as your community. If you want to make a difference in your community, you need a vision as big as your city. If you want to be number one in the city, you need a vision as big as your state. You want a statewide vision, you need a national vision. If you want to be number one in the nation, you need a global vision. But if you want to make a global difference, you need an astronomical vision. And that's why Amazon with Jeff Bezos talked about Sony in his description, that they were interested in doing something for all of Japan, not just their company, but all of Japan. And they had a global vision and a national vision. It was what drove Sony to leadership. And Amazon, the same thing. So people that have astronomical visions are the people that have the most influence in the world. Elon Musk, Branson, Bezos, these guys have astronomical visions. And I had an astronomical vision. That's why I study astronomy and cosmology and astrophysics and nuclear physics and anything that allows me to stretch my mind out into space so I can look and see the world as a toy to play with. I was having dinner with Rupert Murdoch in New York one night, and I asked him how he built his empire. And he said, I have this globe in my office, and I hold it in my hand, and I spin it around, and I look out from a celestial view to the earth instead of from a terrestrial view out to the heavens. He says, and then I ask, what message do I want to bring to what part of the world today? He thinks of it out here, looking down at this small little earth, instead of from the earth looking out these immense heavens. Bigger vision.
That's an interesting concept, especially as he's holding a globe, just even on a daily basis to remind himself how he's looking at the world, right?
Exactly. Exactly. When I opened up my practice many years ago, I got clocks from every major time zone around the world in the reception room. I got a map of the world on the back of a door, a big giant map of this world, and on the wall. And I started putting pins from every place people started coming from. And I had a dream to make sure that I had patients and clients, and then eventually speaking in every country. Over 160 countries I've gotten to speak in now, and I've gone to more than that. So I am absolutely certain that the clarity of vision transcends plateaus of resistance that we have in our minds.
Speak to your, and I often ask some questions about this, but, in your level of personal development and desire there, and how you've pushed yourself obviously to read so much and study so many different things, speak to your daily routine a little bit. Speak to how do you, even the speed reading a little bit. I've been very interested in learning to increase my ability to read and comprehend as well.
Most people only read by their phonemes and they read by their audio. So as fast as they can speak, as fast as they can read. Most people don't know that they will not read faster than they speak as long as they're speaking while they read. It takes a visual reading and a visual system. The speed of sound is not as much as the speed of light. And so if you want a visual reading, you've got to practice visual reading, not audio reading, because most of it's our mouth is moving while we're looking at the words in most cases. So I had to break the sound barrier in order to go into visual reading, and I had to learn how to do that. And I developed my own kind of methodology to do that back when I was 18, 19, when I was trying to figure out how do I read more effectively. And so it's a step-by-step process. But I use visual guides because if I ask you to move your eyes in a circle, it'll jerk and go through a kind of a cascade process. But if I use a visual guide, you can make it smooth. You can follow it. So if you're not reading with a visual guide, your eyes are wandering and back skipping and forward skipping, and it's not present. You're not really focally getting the information. But if you're using a visual guide and then practicing visual peripheral vision, and then eventually practicing speed, anybody can do it. I mean, I've taught thousands of people how to increase their reading. Usually in 5 hours, I can triple people's readings. So it's not hard to do. It's just a matter of practice. It's like anything else. You practice something, you perfect it over time.
Love that. That it's even that, you're opening up to, hey, anybody can learn to do this. It's not just a few people that have this strange ability to speed read.
No. Yeah. If you have a reason for doing it, the why, when the why is big enough, the house take care of themselves. If you have a big enough reason for doing something, you'll figure out how to do it. But if you don't have enough why behind it, if you don't have enough value on doing it, if you don't see how it's going to help you do what's really most important or meaningful to you, you probably won't. But we all have the capacity to do it. I can find out what's most important to somebody and then link reading to it, and I can increase their reading just by doing that. Once they see how it's going to get them what they want, they'll accelerate it.
I feel like that goes right into, you were talking earlier about just prioritizing things and speak to, and not allowing others to cloud that. I like that because I feel like that happens to me all the time, right? You're comparing, you're seeing what other people are doing or thinking, and it changes what you think or prioritize, right? Speak to your daily routine a little bit and how you are so focused and prioritized on the right things, or, how you filter.
Well, I was 27 years old, and I just opened up my shingle in practice, and at the time, because I wanted to be involved in teaching, healing, and philosophy. So I went through a period where I was involved in healing arts. And I noticed I was doing everything in the office. I mean, everything when I first started. I was a generalist doing whatever it took. I had one assistant to do some administration and scheduling and things and appointments, but I was pretty well doing everything. And then I realized that I didn't go to 10 years of college for some of this. This is not really priority stuff. And so I went over to, in those days, a Walden's bookstore. They had Dalton's and Walden's. And I went to this Walden's bookstore and I got this book called The Time Track by Albert McKenzie. And I devoured that book, dog-eared it, marked it, you name it. And I made a summary out of it. And I'd really like to share the summary of this because it was really profound because it scaled up my business very rapidly. I made a list of every single thing that I did in a day. Everything, not a broad, vague, general label like marketing, but the actual action steps that I did throughout the day. And I summarized this over a 3-month period. What would I do over a 3-month period? What were all the things I might do? And I made a list of it. And it was pages of stuff I was doing. Really stuff. As I was making that list, I was already in my mind intuitively sensing I'm doing a lot of low priority stuff here. No wonder I'm not maximizing my potential here. So I made this giant list and I divided it into professional and personal because I was doing stuff at home and I was doing something at work, and sometimes I was cross-referencing, thinking of stuff at home while I was at work and vice versa, and I wasn't present. In the second column of a 6-column summary, that was the first column. The second column, how much money does that produce, that action? And I extrapolated per hour. So if I took 10 minutes, I'd multiply it times 6. If I spent 2 hours, I divide by 2. And I looked at what does it produce per hour? And boy, was that eye-opening, because I had a whole lot of zeros. A lot of stuff I was doing that really was devaluing my time and devaluing me and uninspiring. And as long as somebody is doing low priority things, they're going to devalue themselves. And until they prioritize their life, they're going to not really maximize momentum. So when I went through there and I did that, and then I rearranged that whole list according to what produced the most, second most, et cetera. And the number one thing is not what I went to school for. The number one thing that produced the most income was standing up before other people with my voice and speaking and engaging people to become patients and inspiring and educating people. Because if I do a speak to an hour to somebody, I could get 6 new patients, and the case visit average for those patients was maybe $2,000 or $3,000. So that's an $18,000 hour spending an hour speaking. The second was the actual clinical application. And then it went down from that, from examinations and radiographs and all the way down to all the procedures we did, and down to the supplies, which are hardly anything. And I looked through that and I reprioritized that according to what it produced per hour. And once I did that, I thought, man, I know where I need to be going financially and self-worth wise. And I started charging for stuff I wasn't charging for because it's my time. And then I realized I need to delegate this stuff. This is crazy. I can't be doing this. I can't get ahead doing low priority stuff. Then I went to the third column. How much meaning on a 1 to 10 scale does it have? 10 meaning I'm inspired. I get tears thinking about it. I can't wait to do it. I want to get up and do it. I'm enthused. 0 or 1 is no way, boring, hate doing it. I feel like I got to do it, have to do, must do it. It's a demand of duty instead of a design of inspiration. And I prioritized that whole list according to what was 10s down to 0s and 1s. And then I looked at what was most meaningful and most productive. And I was blessed because some of them overlapped. So I knew right there where I need to be putting my energy. Then I did another column. How much would it cost me to delegate that to a specialist that was more knowledgeable and more inspired to do with that than me? And I'm talking about not just their salaries, but all their cost, their training costs, their parking costs, their insurance costs, every cost. What would it cost? And I made a list of all those costs per hour. And then I looked at the biggest spreads between what it could produce versus what it cost. And then I prioritized it according to spread. Then I put the next column is how much time is actually allotted to it. So I could put a job description together according to time. In the final list, the final column was, what is the final prioritization match going through all the variables? And then I divided that 10 layers and I created a job description for each layer. And then I went to work hiring people to delegate that layer and that layer and that layer. It took me 3 people on the first layer, 2 people on the second layer, and I got better at hiring as I went along. But as I did, I relinquished myself from any of the lower priority things, and I only stuck to the highest priority things. Now, when I did that, my business went up tenfold. And I went from a 970 square foot little office with 1 staff member to 5 doctors, 12 staff members in 18 months. 18 months. I was tenfold the increase, and I was only having to do 3 or 4 things. And I wasn't feeling overwhelmed. I wasn't distracted. I wasn't doing financials and bank reconciliation supplies and all that low priority stuff that I could pay somebody $20 to $50 an hour for. And I was doing the thing to produce thousands per hour, and I was producing more income. And then I invested the extra. I didn't raise my lifestyle. I just invested it. I stepped investing, because until you value you and invest in you, you don't expect anybody else to. That transformed the game. And then I did another exercise after meeting Mary Kay Ash from the Mary Kay Cosmetic Company, because she asked me to speak to 4,500 women in Dallas at the Anatole. And I asked her at the end of my speech, I said, what advice can you give a young aspiring speaker that wants to travel the world and inspire people? And she said, every day, write down the 6 or 7 highest priority actions you can conceive of that would help you fulfill your dreams. She spoke slow in Texas. And I pulled out an index card. I always carried index cards for taking notes. I carried out index cards. I meditated, thought about what I was grateful for, got authentic for a moment, and then asked, what is the highest priority action I can do today? Top 6 or 7 highest priority actions I can do today to make my dream come true. And I kept records of that. And I looked at what was the top priorities of the top priorities of the top priorities over time. And it boiled down to teach, research, write, and travel. So since then, that's all I do. I've delegated everything else. Today, I teach every day. I research every day. I write every day. And I travel most every day. And I'm more than financially independent 50 times over. And people say, well, that's easy because you're financially independent. No. I became financially independent because I did it. It's not the other way around. When people start to manage their money and their life wisely and prioritize their life, they get more life and money to manage.
Love that. The prioritizing what's most important first, and then delegating ultimately, right? I mean, if
you're not dedicated to what's highest in priority and delegating what's lower in priority, don't expect an inspired life.
Wow. I guess after coaching so many people, what's some of the maybe the low hanging fruit of things that you see? Like, why aren't you delegating these things? Why aren't you delegating these things? Why, or maybe a few things that's like the listener today could think differently about handing off a few things.
Oh, well, the same obstacles I ran into when I started. By the time I delegated, I could have done it. If I delegate, they're not going to do it as well as I do. You get your ego in your way. If I do it, it's going to cost me money and I don't have the money and I won't have any profits. There's all kind of lies we give ourselves about doing it. But that's usually because we're not delegating wisely. We're delegating unwisely by finding people that are incompetent, that we're trying to micromanage and push uphill to do what's not inspiring to them, instead of finding people that love doing what we want to delegate and they're greater at it than we are. So we're liberated from it. We don't have to abnegate. We don't have to do anything. It's just freed. And we get on to what we do. It frees us up to produce more. So it's those obstacles. And I also found recently had a guy, he says, well, I'd like to double my business, but I'm afraid. And we narrowed it down and we found out that 4 of his buddies in the last 3 years, when they grew their business enormously, they went through a divorce. In his mind, he had 3 young kids. The thought of a divorce was overwhelmingly frightened. In his mind, if he doubles his business, he's going to end up in a divorce. That's how his mind was set up because of his subconsciously stored baggage from seeing his buddies and them not knowing how to communicate in a way where the wife is benefiting from their growth. So I asked him a simple question. How specifically is growing your business going to help your wife fulfill what's most meaningful to her? And how is doing what's most meaningful to her and spending time with your kids going to help you grow your business? If you don't link values, they interfere with each other. But if you link them, they enhance each other. So I basically showed him how to link. And the second he saw it, he got a vision on how he could accomplish it. He didn't have the anxiety. And he had a 30% increase that year, 30% increase on his business and his income. And it's because he got through his block. And we have these subconsciously stored misperceptions about reality that we've inculcated from people around us and from our peers, our mothers and fathers and preachers and teachers and mores and conventions and traditions. And we stop ourselves from going on to the next level. And we really want it, but we don't think we want it. We lie to ourselves saying, oh, I don't want it. But if I show them how to get there, they'll take it.
No, I can relate to that personally. That's for sure. John, we just have just a few minutes left here, and I want to ask just a few other specific questions as we get close out here. But I ask everybody, what's your best advice for passive investors right now?
Well, I'm a passive investor. I started investing in 1982, October 1982. I started to buy stocks, and in those days you had mutual funds. I then learned from one of the brokers that was in Shearson Lehman Hutton that was in my building there at the Williams Tower. It was called Transco Tower in those days in Houston. There was a lovely lady there. It was a very well-off broker there. And I went down at lunch to learn from her. And I noticed that she gave me reports on money managers in America every single day. They had a report of what their money management was. And I noticed that none of them stayed in the top quartile for 3 years or beyond. Nobody was beating the average. And so that's when in 1986, I started buying S&P 500 and the Russell 2000. And I started buying the indices with a lower cost, lower turnover rates, and just started buying that. And I've been doing that every single week now since 1986. So I've been investing on a weekly basis since 1982, but just indices since 1986. The costs are down. I don't have the taxes because they're deferred, they're reinvested. And I just buy quality companies that have been well managed, that have self-governance, that meet the criteria, and are just quality. I would say when you invest in people that are serving other people and they're doing it with governance, you're going to be rewarded. And so I'm a passive investor, and I'm constantly buying high quality companies on a weekly basis. 42 years now.
Incredible. What's a challenge you're facing in your business right now?
In my challenge right now, I've just got asked to be interviewed by Forbes this week. So I'm going to go and do a thing for Forbes in a couple of days. The biggest challenge that I have is all the people in the social media that want to do things. They're constantly putting expectations and entitlements and opportunistic things thrown at you. And I have now Gatekeeper to take care of all that for me. That was my big challenge. Because I would sometimes say yes. I found out if I don't fill my day with absolute every hour filled, interesting stuff by Parkinson's law will fill it. So I just basically have a gatekeeper to take care of it. She knows my criteria. It's been listed. That was my challenge. I would see opportunities and I'd be inspired by them. Uh-oh, Captain.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
That's all right.
So,
I bet you probably haven't had an interruption from a sea captain. Our sea captain usually makes announcements.
2022 shows. That's the first.
Yeah, he's a lovely guy from Norway. I've known him for 23 years. He's been the captain, and he takes care of me. So all I know is that he makes announcements, and we're about to leave someplace. So we were anchored right off this beautiful island where I went today. So we're off to heading towards Makassar, Indonesia, and then over to Bali. So that's where we're going. But my challenge was basically sometimes I would have many different opportunities thrown at me. And as a result of those opportunities, I would be a tiny distracted by which ones do I want to do and not. And so I put a criteria down and I gave it to a gatekeeper. Now they take care of it. So I delegate everything. When I told my girlfriend, I said, look, if I was to delegate lovemaking to George Clooney, would you still love me? She said, I'll love you even more. I'm joking about that one. That one I would do, but I'm teasing.
Yeah.
But delegation liberates people from that which weighs them down and lifts them up and lightens their load.
All right. Number one thing, if you had to pick one thing that's contributed to your success.
Having the inspiration and a dream and not ever stopping and just keep pursuing it. I learned something from Crazy Donald. I've known Donald for, our former president. He's a crazy guy, but I've known him since about 1990, 91. And he gave me some good advice one time in his office. And he said, find the one thing that you love to do and then do it. And do it so consistently and so intensely that people get to know you by it. So I've been teaching one of my classes called the Breakthrough Experience 1,216 times. I just do what I love daily. If you can do that, that one piece of advice can build something. Get known for something that you're great at. The people I know that do extraordinary things, I had a pianist recently on the ship here that did piano for us. He started at age 3. He was doing concert pianists around the world by 9. He's 81 now. And I had lunch and dinner with him, and I asked him, what's his routine? And he said, I was thinking 3 to 6 hours a day piano, 13 hours a day for 78 years. Okay? He loves piano. I love teaching, researching, writing, and traveling. So I do it every day. Stick to what you're great at. Master your core competence, stick to it, build momentum, delegate anything not, and give yourself permission to shine.
Such good advice. It reminded me of a quote I just read from Thomas Buxton that said, with ordinary talent and extraordinary perseverance, all things are attainable. So
Exactly.
Yeah, love that. John, last question before we have to go is I like to ask everybody, how do you like to give back? Which I know you do a ton of.
Well, my main give back, I mean, I do some things that are philanthropically. My main philanthropic thing is my prize. I'm trying to create a prize that competes with the Nobel Prize. So I'm there. I've worked for it. I've saved for it, invested for it. But mine is education. I learned when I was probably 27, I got a great quote. You probably heard it before, that you give a person a fish, you feed them for a day, you teach them how to fish, you feed them for a lifetime. I believe that education is one of the greatest philanthropic aspects. So most of my philanthropy relates to education. I don't want to rob people of dignity, accountability, responsibility, or productivity. I don't want to rob them of an incentive and inspiration to do something on their own. I want to educate them on the power to master their life. To me, that's my philanthropy.
John, been just an honor to have you back on the show. Just a wealth of knowledge, and I just love the even personal coaching that just talking just through these things. I think is so helpful for me, and I know the listeners as well. Just even hearing your story from homeless to surfing to, man, the inspirations that really just helped you to pivot, right? And really believe that in a bigger vision and what was actually possible, and that you could do it, and you have. And so grateful for your just transparency and willing to share that, so it inspires others also. How can people learn more about you? Obviously, we're going to link to your website and whatnot, but still, how can they learn more about you so they can get to know you?
They can just go to the website, drdemartini.com, and browse that. That'll keep them busy for at least a lifetime. And then we have a new movie coming out in October called The Breakthrough Movie. It's about my life and a journey. They did a documentary movie on it. It's won a bunch of awards, so I'm really pleased with it. And but that's coming out. It's called The Breakthrough Movie, or Breakthrough Movie. Just send Breakthrough Movie Demartini, and then it'll pull up. And that's about to come out.
Awesome. That's a wrap, John. That's the end of the show.
Perfect.
Yeah. Well, thank you again so much. Have a blessed trip.
God bless you. Enjoy your evening. Thank you. Or morning.
You too. Yeah, you too. Bye.
Bye.